Alright guys, Darren from FBA Elite and welcome back to another video. So Amazon FBA just isn't the same anymore. What do I mean by that? Well, this is one of the most common concerns I hear from new sellers that have just started Amazon FBA or are thinking about starting Amazon FBA. And they question people like myself who have been selling on Amazon for a number of years that the only reason we've been successful is because we got in at the right time. And that is a fair concern. You know, I started just over 5 years ago, back in 2018, and Amazon has evolved since I started. And in some ways it is more challenging, but in other ways it is slightly easier. So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 big things that have changed since I started selling on Amazon. And one of them, the last one that I'm going to cover in this video, is so important for new sellers. So make sure you stick around for that, as it's probably the most important point in this video for new sellers. So number one, the first point I want to touch on is Amazon FBA private label. And the reason I'm calling it that is that people don't generally use the private label terminology now like they used to back in 2018. Back then, it was always Amazon FBA private label. Nowadays, everyone just calls it Amazon FBA, which can be quite confusing, as there are two main business models that people tend to do with Amazon FBA, which is arbitrage, which I've experimented with and prefer not to do, and private label, which I've been doing for the past 5 years and I think is the best model available if you're considering Amazon FBA. And the reason it's called private label is you're applying your own brand to a white label product, usually from a supplier in China. And back in 2018, private labeling the product was almost enough to become a successful seller, provided you'd pick the right product and the right niche. If you put your brand on a product, didn't make any other changes, but did a nice listing and optimized it correctly, you had a chance of going on to enjoy success. But that isn't the case any longer. You still want to private label the product, but don't see private labeling as a route to success. You have to add other changes to that product to give you a chance of standing out. Just having a nice listing with the same product as everyone else and with your own brand on it isn't enough. And this is the big change between 2018 and where we are now, is you need to make other enhancements to the product. These could be visual, these could be functional. The key thing is you need to keep in mind at all stages is that you have to make sure your product stands out in the search results against the existing listings. When someone searches for your product, how are you going to stand out? How are you going to draw the eye and then convert that customer to a purchase? That's what you've got to focus on. So that is one of the big differences. That is the first big difference. Private labeling alone is not enough. You have to make other changes to that product so that you stand out in the search results. And that is how you'll get ahead now versus what you needed to do back in 2018. The next point I want to focus on is you need a larger budget now than you used to back in 2018. Back then, people are often saying you can start Amazon FBA with maybe £1,000 or £1,500 or £2,000. Nowadays, I wouldn't touch FBA private labeling if you have less than £3,000. You need money for many areas of Amazon FBA that you also needed back then in 2018, but they are more critical now. So, for example, pay-per-click. Your sponsored ads are now much more expensive and you need to use them a lot more. You've got import costs, so shipping costs to the UK are much higher than they used to be, so bringing in large quantities of goods costs you a lot more. Things like your trademarks, which people used to treat as optional, are now absolutely essential to protecting your product and your product listing. You've also got things like software, which are absolutely essential as well. There's very few successful Amazon sellers out there that aren't using software. So you're going to need a bigger budget now than you used to 5 years ago. But, you know, inflation, everything's gone up, so it's only natural that you're going to need a bit more money. But I would say if you got less than £3,000, work on building that capital first. But if you've got at least £3,000, then you're in a reasonable place to start Amazon FBA. Now, coming back to PPC, and this brings me back on to point 3. Back in 2018, when you launched a product, you would run a bit of PPC for a few weeks. Some people wouldn't. Some people would do giveaways, which is no longer the way to launch a product, by the way. Whereas nowadays, you need PPC at launch and you need it on an ongoing basis. So PPC should always be part of your profit calculations on an ongoing basis, because it's very rarely the case now. You can launch a product with PPC, get the organic ranks high enough, and then you can just turn off your marketing. That's not how it works. There is so much competition. Amazon clocked on to how much money they can make from PPC, so they're promoting it all the time to lots of sellers. So any product you launch, you're going to need PPC to launch it and PPC to maintain the ranks that you achieve as well. So that is one of the big changes from 2018. PPC is required on an ongoing basis, not just a temporary basis when you first launch a product. Number 4, again, is coming back to what I just mentioned on point 2, which was software. The tools are much, much better. When I started, everyone talked about Jungle Scout and everyone just used the Jungle Scout sales estimator you downloaded, installed into Chrome, and that was it. That was all anyone ever used. I very quickly started using Helium 10 and I've been using it ever since because it's a more complete suite of tools. The reason a lot of us used Jungle Scout in the early days is, one, is what everyone talked about, but 2, they used to have a one-off cost. So you'd spend, I think it was a couple $100, you'd get a one-off cost and that'd be it. Whereas now all of these tools have moved to a monthly subscription. And the reason I switched to Helium 10 is it had a much more complete suite of tools. So tools are essential to an Amazon FBA business now. If you don't use them, you have no way of monitoring how your listing is doing. You can't track the organic ranks. You can't do the keyword research. You can't make sure your listing is optimized correctly. You can't monitor it for hijackers or negative reviews. There are so many things you need tools for. And if you don't use them, you will struggle against the sellers that are using them. Now, like I said, I use Helium 10. I'll pop up my usual discount codes and pin one in the pinned top comment. But that is a big change from 2018. It's no longer a case of just using a sales estimator tool to find a product. You need a tool that's going to help you from the very start of your journey through the entire process and from when you're launching your product and on that ongoing basis as well for maintaining and defending that product rank and from other sellers. And then the final point, which is the most important point for new sellers, is that new sellers now can change a setting in their account that will give them an advantage over than what we had back in 2018. So back in 2018, new sellers, we had to pay VAT on all of the fees that Amazon charge us. So when you're typically selling a product on Amazon, you'll probably sell a product somewhere between £20 to £30, which means you're paying somewhere in the region of £5 to £10 in Amazon fees. And that will be your fulfillment fee, which Amazon will charge you for packaging up the product, sending it to the customer, managing customer service, etc. And also a fee for actually selling on Amazon in the first place, which is your referral fee. And that fee will come, a total fee together will be somewhere between £5 to £10. Now, back when I started, Amazon charged us VAT on them fees, and unless we become VAT registered, we couldn't claim that VAT back. So on a product that's selling for £20 to £30, with £5 to £10 of fees, that's £1 to £2 of profit per unit we were losing. Now, new sellers now can declare themselves as VAT exempt until they get to the VAT threshold, which is £85,000, and they will not have to pay VAT on those seller fees. You'll still have to pay VAT on the sponsored ads as they're invoiced from Amazon UK, but the Amazon fees for fulfillment and referral fees, they're invoiced from Amazon Luxembourg. So Amazon will exempt you from that and you won't have to pay VAT on those fees. So new sellers now have that £1 to £2 profit margin advantage that we didn't have back all those years ago. Now, if you're in the process of opening your Amazon seller account or you've opened it recently, I've put together a video talking you through all the settings that you need to change ASAP, including all of the steps you need to follow to register yourself as VAT exempt so you don't have to pay a VAT on those fulfillment and referral fees. And if you want to see that video, I'm going to pop up a link to it now and I'll see you guys over there.